It got to a point where, Kenny Noye was being spotted on the moon almost. It was getting ludicrous. I mean, the idea that Kenny Noye was coming in and out of the country, having a few beers with his mates, and then hopping back on a plane back to wherever he was, it was ludicrous.
We had reported sightings or reports that Kenny Noye's best friend's daughter's going to get married at a certain location. Kenny will not miss that wedding for the world. He'll be there. We had reported sightings or reports that he was at or going to an old friend's funeral. He wouldn't miss that funeral for the world. He'll be there. We actually went to more weddings and funerals than Hugh Grant, and that's with all the repeats as well.
In the annals of British criminal history, few names evoke as much intrigue and notoriety as Kenneth Noye. His journey from a suburban upbringing to becoming one of the country's most feared criminals is a tale that intersects with some of the most significant criminal events of the late 20th century. Mr. Noye's life is not just a chronicle of crime, but a window into the darker recesses of human psyche and the complexities of the British criminal justice system. Kenneth Noye's criminal career spanned several decades, during which he masterfully navigated the criminal underworld, leaving a trail of mysteries, controversy, and legal battles in his wake. His involvement in the infamous Brink's-Mat robbery, where an astonishing £26 million worth of gold bullion was stolen, marked him as a formidable figure in the organised crime world. However, it was the brutal road rage murder of Stephen Cameron on the M25 in 1996 that catapulted Mr. Noye into the public consciousness, transforming him from a shadowy underworld figure to a household name synonymous with uncontrollable rage and violence. This documentary aims to delve beyond the headlines, exploring not just the sensational aspects of Mr. Noye's crimes, but the human stories behind them. It seeks to understand the man behind the myths, the social conditions that fostered his rise in the criminal underworld, and the impact of his actions on victims, their families, and the broader community. Through a detailed examination of his life, from his early days to his dramatic trials and eventual imprisonment, we will attempt to unravel the complex web of motivations, fears, and desires that drove Kenneth Noye. Moreover, this narrative will reflect on the broader implication of Mr. Noye's story for the British criminal system and society at large. It will explore the themes of justice, rehabilitation, and the possibility of redemption, questioning the efficiency of a system that often seems a labyrinth and opaque as the criminal networks it seems to dismantle. As we journey through the shadows and silhouettes of Kenneth Noye's life, we invite you to look beyond the surface, to question and to reflect. In doing so, we hope to provide a nuanced portrayal of a man who became a mirror for the darkest potentials of human condition, and a society grappling with the complexities of justice and morality in the face of abject criminality. In the quiet suburbs of London, in the post-war era of the 1940s, Kenneth Noye was born into a world rapidly changing. The son of a postman, Mr. Noye's early life seemed unremarkable, a common story of a working-class family navigating the challenges of a country rebuilding itself. Yet beneath this veneer of normalcy, the seeds of a tumultuous figure were being sown. In this part of the story, we plan to unearth the roots of Kenneth Noye's journey into the criminal underworld, tracing the line from the ordinary childhood to the genesis of a career that would leave an undeniable mark on the British criminal landscape. Kenneth Noye was born on May the 24th, 1947 in Bexleyheath, a suburban district in the southeast area of London. His parents, working class and striving for a better life for their family, were part of the post-war generation determined to rebuild and prosper. Mr. Noye's education began in local schools, where he was described as an average student, neither excelling nor falling behind. It was a time of innocence, but for Mr. Noye, it was also a period of discovery and, crucially, the awakening of an ambition that would steer him towards a darker path. As Mr. Noye grew, so did his realizations of the limitations imposed by his modest background. The 1960s in Britain were a time of cultural revolution, economic challenges and social upheaval. For a young man with ambition and a growing awareness of the disparities in wealth and opportunity around him, the allure of quick success and the trappings of wealth became increasingly irresistible. It was during these formative years that Mr. Noye first brushed with the law. Minor transgressions, often dismissed as youthful indiscretions, laid the groundwork for his understanding of risks and rewards of a life in the shadows. These early experiences with criminality were not yet indicative of the notorious figure he would become, but they were essential chapters in the story of his evolution. The leap from small-time delinquency to organised crime was not immediate, but a series of choices and circumstances that gradually entwined Mr. Noye deeper into the criminal underworld. The exact moment this transition began is difficult to pinpoint, obscured by the secretive nature of his activities and the lack of concrete evidence from those early days. However, it is clear that by his late 20s, Mr. Noye had developed connections with more established criminals drawn in the promise of lucrative rewards. This period marked a significant transition in Mr. Noye's life. He began to acquire the skills and contacts necessary for major criminal enterprises, including the handling of stolen goods, the logistics of smuggling, and, more fatefully, the laundering of money. It was a time of learning and networking, as Mr. Noye absorbed the ethos of the underworld. Trust no one, keep your eyes open, and always be prepared to seize on an opportunity. Kenneth Noye's early life offers a glimpse into the complex interplay of personal ambition, social pressures, and the allure of the criminal underworld. From a childhood in post-war London to the cusp of becoming one of Britain's most notorious criminals, his journey is a testament to the unpredictable paths that life can take. As we close this chapter on Mr. Noye's beginnings, we stand on the threshold of his entry into high-stake crime, poised to delve into the events that would define his legacy and shake the foundations of the British criminal justice system. Kenneth Noye's journey from the fringes of petty crime to the heart of the British underworld is a tale of ambition, cunning and ruthlessness. As the 1970s dawned, Mr. Noye found himself at a crossroads, with the paths leading deeper into the shadows of criminality. This chapter explores his ascension into the underworld, charting the pivotal moments and the alliances that propelled him from a small-time crook to a key figure in organised crime. Mr. Noye's initial forays into serious crime were marked with opportunism and a quick learning curve. He dabbled in various illicit enterprises, from handling stolen goods to participating in burglary rings. These early activities were crucial in establishing Mr. Noye's reputation as a reliable and resourceful criminal operative. He displayed a natural affinity for logistics of crime, particularly in areas of transportation and storage, which made him an invaluable asset to more established figures in the criminal world. The defining shift in Mr. Noye's criminal career came with his involvement in the more sophisticated and lucrative operations. He began to engage in large-scale thefts, including armed robbery and hijacking, demonstrating a boldness of strategic thinking that set him apart from his peers. It was during this period that Mr. Noye's network expanded, connecting him with some of the most notorious criminals in Britain. These connections were facilitated by his growing expertise in laundering of stolen goods, particularly precious metal, which would later become one of his trademarks. One of Mr. Noye's most significant early operations involved the theft of electronic goods, a venture that netted a substantial profit and solidified his status within the criminal hierarchy. This operation was a turning point, showcasing Mr. Noye's ability to plan, execute, and evade law enforcement, skills that would become increasingly refined over the years. The pivotal moment in Mr. Noye's ascent came from his involvement in laundering of gold bullion. This operation stemmed from one of the largest robberies at the time, which left the criminals with a problem: how to convert the stolen gold into cash without attracting attention. Mr. Noye's ingenuity and connections made him the perfect candidate for this task. He orchestrated a complex laundering scheme, melting down the gold and mixing it with other metals to disguise its origin. This operation not only brought Mr. Noye immense wealth, but also firmly established him as a mastermind in the criminal underworld. With the proceeds from the gold laundering and other ventures, Mr. Noye began to build an empire. He invested in legitimate businesses as fronts for his operations and acquired properties that served as bases for his criminal activities. This period also saw Mr. Noye cultivating relationships with corrupt officials and law enforcement, ensuring a degree of protection and inside information that allowed him to stay one step ahead of investigations. Kenneth Noye's rise in the underworld was marked by strategic brilliance, ruthlessness, and an unparalleled ability to navigate the complexities of organised crime. And by the end of the 1970s, he had transformed from a small-time thief into a key player in the criminal landscape, involved in some of the most significant criminal operations of the decade. His journey into the depths of organised crime was not just a testament of his personal ambition and cunning, but also a reflection of the darker undercurrents of British society at the time. The Brinks Mat robbery, executed on the 26th of November 1983, stands as one of the most audacious heists in British history. It was an operation that not only netted an astronomical sum in gold bullion, but also marked the zenith of Kenneth Noye's criminal career. This chapter delves into the planning, execution, and aftermath of the robbery, highlighting Mr. Noye's pivotal role in the laundering of the gold and the sprawling web of crime it unleashed across the country. In the early hours of a chilly November morning, a gang of robbers breached the security of the Brinks Mat warehouse at Heathrow Airport. The target was a trove of gold bullion, cash, and diamonds. The robbers, expecting a modest haul, were astonished to find gold bars worth £26 million, an amount far exceeding their wildest estimations. The heist was marked by a combination of meticulous planning and sheer audacity, setting it apart in the annals of criminal law. Kenneth Noye, already a figure of significant standing in the criminal underworld, was brought in for his expertise in melting down and laundering precious metal. His role was to transform the stolen gold into a form that could be sold without raising suspicion. Mr. Noye orchestrated a sophisticated operation, employing a network of contacts to discreetly distribute the gold into the market. His methods were so effective that much of the gold was believed to have been assimilated into a legitimate supply chain, disappearing without a trace. The magnitude of the Brinks Mat heist drew a massive response from law enforcement. The investigation was extensive, spanning several countries and involving numerous agencies. Despite the efforts of the authorities, the bulk of the gold was never recovered, and many of those involved in the heist and subsequent laundering operation, including Mr. Noye, proved difficult to apprehend due to the lack of direct evidence linking them to the crime. Mr. Noye's involvement in the Brinks Mat robbery elevated his status to that of a criminal mastermind. However, it marked the beginning of an intense scrutiny from law enforcement and rival criminals alike. The sudden influx of gold into the market had far-reaching effects, not only disrupting the gold price, but also financing a surge in criminal activities across the UK. The Brinks Mat robbery had a lasting impact on British crime, law enforcement, and the gold market. It exposed vulnerabilities in security and the challenges faced by authorities in tracking and prosecuting organised crime. For Mr. Noye, the heist was both a triumph and a curse. While it demonstrated his capabilities and earned him a fortune, it also set in motion a series of events that would eventually lead to his downfall. The aftermath of the robbery was characterised by violence and betrayal, as disputes over the distribution of the loot led to several murders, further complicating the investigation. Mr. Noye, meanwhile, navigated these turbulent waters with his charismatic caution and cunning, but the seeds of his eventual capture were sown in the wake of the Brinks Mat heist. The Brinks Mat robbery remains one of the most significant events in British criminal history, emblematic of the era's rampant lawlessness and the audacity of its criminals. For Kenneth Noye, it represented the pinnacle of his criminal achievements, but also the beginning of an end marked by paranoia, violence, and the relentless pursuit by the authorities. As we conclude this chapter, we turn to the subsequent phases of Mr. Noye's life, where the consequences of his actions at the Brinks Mat began to manifest in increasingly dire ways, leading to a dramatic and violent confrontation that would capture the nation's attention. After the Brinks Mat robbery, Kenneth Noye found himself living in a paradoxical existence, marked by the opulent luxury on the one hand, and the pervasive atmosphere of suspicion and danger on the other. His substantial wealth, much of it derived from his role in laundering the stolen gold, allowed him to adapt a lifestyle that was the envy of many. However, this newfound affluence was a double-edged sword, attracting not just the envy of his peers, but the unwavering scrutiny of law enforcement. This chapter examines Mr. Noye's life during this period, highlighting the intricate balance he maintained between his public persona as a successful businessman and his clandestine existence as a criminal mastermind. In the aftermath of the Brinksmat heist, Mr. Noye invested heavily in creating a veneer of legitimacy. He funneled portions of his illicit gains into legitimate businesses, including property development and the metal trade, industries where large transactions and the movement of goods could be more easily obscured. On the surface, Mr. Noye appeared to be a shrewd businessman, leveraging his wealth to build a reputable enterprise. This facade was meticulously crafted to shield his criminal undertakings from the law and to launder the proceedings of his criminal activities. Central to Mr. Noye's display of wealth was his acquisition of the sprawling mansion in Kent. Equipped with state-of-the-art security and luxury amenities, the property became a symbol of his success and a fortress that insulated him from the outside world. Here, Mr. Noye hosted lavish parties attended by the elite of the criminal underworld and those unwittingly drawn into his sphere. Yet the mansion also served as a command centre for his operations, a place where deals were made and plans were hatched away from prying eyes. Despite his efforts to blend into the legitimate business world, Mr. Noye could not fully escape the shadows of suspicion that followed him. The law enforcement community, well aware of his criminal background and suspected involvement in the Brinksmat robbery, kept him under constant surveillance. This scrutiny only intensified as Mr. Noye became linked with other criminal investigations, further entangling him in the web of legal challenges and public suspicion. The constant surveillance and pressure of living a double life took its toll on Mr. Noye. Paranoia became a constant companion, leading him to adopt an increasingly reclusive lifestyle. Trust became a commodity, as scarce as the legitimate origins of his wealth, leading to tensions within the criminal associations and amongst his closest confidants. Precarious balance Mr. Noye had maintained began to tip as the 1990s dawned. His involvement in a series of violent incidences, including confrontations with rival criminals and law enforcement, signalled a shift in the underworld dynamics. Mr. Noye's capacity for violence, previously used as a deterrent, was now becoming a liability, drawing further attention to his activities and straining his relationships with both criminal associates and legitimate business communities. Kenneth Noye's life of luxury, built on the proceeds of his criminal enterprises, was a testament to the heights a criminal could reach within the British criminal underworld. Yet this life was also a prison of his own making, a gilded cage constructed from fear, suspicion, and the ever-present threat of retribution. As we close this chapter on Mr. Noye's life post-Brinksmat, we stand on the precipice of the event that would forever alter his fate, the road rage murder of Stephen Cameron. This act of violence would strip away the very last vestiges of Mr. Noye's carefully constructed facade, revealing the true nature of the man beneath and setting the stage for his ultimate downfall. The pivotal moment in Kenneth Noye's life came on a sunny afternoon in May 1996, on the slip road of the M25 motorway near Swanley in Kent. The chapter delves into the road rage incident that led to the murder of 21-year-old Stephen Cameron and marked the beginning of the end for Mr. Noye. It was an act of violence that shocked the nation and irreversibly altered the course of Mr. Noye's life, casting him not just as a master criminal, but as a cold-blooded killer. The confrontation between Kenneth Noye and Stephen Cameron arose from a mundane traffic dispute, a common occurrence on the busy motorways surrounding London. However, what set this incident apart was the lethal escalation that followed. Witnesses described a verbal altercation that rapidly spiraled out of control, culminating in Mr. Noye stabbing Mr. Cameron to death in broad daylight. The brutality and the public nature of the attack stunned the community and ignited a media frenzy. In the immediate aftermath of the murder, Mr. Noye utilised his criminal networks and resources to vanish. His disappearance was swift and well organised, evidencing the planning of a man accustomed to evading law enforcement. Mr. Noye fled the country, sparking an international manhunt that underscored the seriousness with which the authorities pursued him. His ability to remain at large for over 2 years spoke of the depth of his connections within the criminal underworld and his knowledge of evasive tactics. The search for Kenneth Noye became top priority for British law enforcement, involving cooperation with international agencies. Mr. Noye was eventually located in Spain, a country known for harbouring British fugitives due to its extradition policies at the time. His arrest in August 1998 was the culmination of extensive surveillance and intelligence operation. Mr. Noye's extradition to the UK was a significant victory for authorities, marking the end of his time as a fugitive, but the beginning of a new chapter of legal battles. Kenneth Noye's trial for the murder of Stephen Cameron was a highly publicised affair, drawing intense media coverage and public interest. The prosecution presented a case that painted Mr. Noye as a dangerous and violent man, prone to using extreme force to resolve disputes. The defence argued for self-defence, a claim that was ultimately rejected by the jury. Mr. Noye was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment, a verdict that was met with relief by Mr. Cameron's family and a significant portion of the public who had followed the case closely. The road rage murder and subsequent trial marked a turning point in Kenneth Noye's life. Once a shadowy figure operating behind the scenes of Britain's criminal underworld, he was now a convicted murderer, his crimes laid bare for all to see. The incident stripped away the layers of mystique and the fear that surrounded him, revealing the stark reality of his capacity for violence. As Mr. Noye began his life sentence, the broader implications of his actions began to emerge, sparking debates on road rage and the nature of justice, and the effectiveness of the UK legal system in dealing with high-profile criminals. The murder of Stephen Cameron and the downfall of Kenneth Noye stand as a grim reminder of the thin line between civility and savagery on the roads and in the hearts of individuals. As we move forward in this narrative, we explore the legal battles that ensured Mr. Noye's life behind bars and the lasting impact of his actions on the criminal landscape of Britain. Following the conviction of Kenneth Noye for the murder of Stephen Cameron, a series of legal battles ensued, highlighting the complexities of the British legal system and the challenges in ensuring justice of a high-profile criminal case. Mr. Noye's legal team launched a series of appeals, challenging both his conviction and the severity of his sentence, while his life behind bars became a focal point for discussions on prison reform, inmate rights, and the rehabilitation of offenders. This chapter explores the aftermath of Mr. Noye's conviction, the legal maneuvers employed by his defence, and the broader implications for the criminal justice system. Mr. Noye's conviction was not the end of his story, but the beginning of a protracted legal struggle. His defence team argued on several fronts, including alleged misinterpretation of evidence, procedural errors during the trial, and the contention that Mr. Noye acted in self-defence. These appeals were meticulously crafted, aimed at exploiting any potential weakness in the prosecution's case and the legal process. However, the appeal courts upheld the original verdict, reinforcing the message that Mr. Noye's violent actions would not be excused or minimised. Kenneth Noye's incarceration shed light on his adaptability and the persona he adopted within the prison system. Reports suggested that Mr. Noye quickly established himself as a figure of influence amongst inmates, leveraging his notoriety and wealth to navigate the complexities of prison life. This period also highlighted issues within the penal system, including the treatment of high-profile inmates and the challenges in providing rehabilitation opportunities for those serving life sentences. The condition of Mr. Noye's imprisonment, including periods of solitary confinement and the restrictions imposed on him, became a point of contention. Advocates for prison reform used his case to argue for more humane and rehabilitative approaches to incarceration, emphasizing the need for programs that would prepare inmates for eventual reintegration into society. The legal battles and Mr. Noye's life in prison were subject to intense public and media scrutiny. The case raised questions about the nature of justice, the purpose of punishment, and the capacities for individuals for change. Media coverage often portrayed Mr. Noye as a remorseless criminal, yet there were also discussions about the effectiveness of the UK's penal system in dealing with individuals like him. The ongoing interest in Mr. Noye's case reflected a broader social fascination fascination with crime and punishment, particularly in the cases involving individuals who had risen to prominence within the criminal underworld. This scrutiny often influenced public opinion, which in turn impacted the legal proceedings and the administration of Mr. Noye's sentence. Kenneth Noye's legal battles and incarceration highlight the challenges faced by the criminal justice system in balancing the demands for punishment with the potential for rehabilitation. His case serves as a study in the complexities in dealing with high-profile criminals and the legal strategies employed by both defense and prosecution, and the broader social implications of crime and punishment. As Mr. Noye continues to serve his sentence, his story remains a potent reminder of the impact of his crimes, not only on the victims and their families, but also on the legal and penal systems. The legacy of Kenneth Noye is one of violence, manipulation, and the long shadow cast by criminal action on the fabric of society. As we move forward, the narrative shifts to reflect on the social impacts of Mr. Noye's crimes, the effectiveness of the British criminal justice system in addressing such high-profile cases, and the ongoing debates about justice, punishment, and the possibility of redemption for convicted criminals. Mr. Noye's criminal endeavours, particularly the Brink's-Mat robbery and the murder of Stephen Cameron, have had far-reaching consequences beyond the immediate victims. These acts of crime highlighted vulnerabilities in security and law enforcement, prompting changes in how precious metal transactions are monitored and how road rage incidents are prosecuted. Moreover, the public's fascination with Mr. Noye's rise and fall underscores a society grappling with the allure of the criminal underworld and the thin lines between respectability and infamy. The trials and appeals surrounding Kenneth Noye have put the British criminal justice system under intense scrutiny. Questions have been raised about the efficiency of the legal process, from investigation and arrest to trial and sentencing. Mr. Noye's ability to evade capture for years and the drawn-out legal proceedings that followed his arrest have led to calls for reform aimed at enhancing efficiency, transparency, and fairness in handling high-profile criminal cases. A key aspect of the disclosure surrounding Mr. Noye's imprisonment is the debate over the possibility of rehabilitation for convicted murderers. The British penal system's approach to rehabilitation, particularly for lifers like Mr. Noye, raises important questions about the goals of incarceration. Is the primary aim to punish, to protect society, or to rehabilitate the individual for eventual reintegration? Mr. Noye's case challenges the public and policymakers to consider whether individuals who have committed heinous crimes can genuinely change, and what measures are necessary to ensure that change is both real and lasting. Kenneth Noye's story serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked ambition and the allure of the criminal lifestyle. It also highlights the enduring human fascination with crime and the complex interplay between law enforcement, the legal system, and the media in shaping narratives around crime and punishment. As society continues to evolve, the lessons learned from Mr. Noye's case remain relevant, informing ongoing discussions about justice, the nature of evil, and the capacity for redemption. The legacy of Kenneth Noye is complex, embodying themes of ambition, crime, punishment, and the quest for justice. His story invites reflection on the effectiveness of the criminal justice system, the potential for rehabilitation, and the social impacts of crime. As we close this chapter, it is clear the debate over the issues will continue, fueled by cases like Mr. Noye's that challenge our assumptions and force us to confront the darker aspects of human nature and society. The narrative of Kenneth Noye is more than just recounting of crimes. It is a mirror reflecting the challenges, dilemmas, and moral questions that society faces in dealing with criminal behaviour. As we move forward, the lessons drawn from Mr. Noye's life and the broader implications of his actions will undoubtedly influence the future approaches to crime, justice, and rehabilitation in the UK and beyond. Kenneth Noye's release from prison marks a new chapter in his long and tumultuous journey through the British criminal justice system. After serving a significant portion of his life sentence, his return to society has reignited discussions on rehabilitation, redemption, and the challenges faced by those seeking to reintegrate after long periods of incarceration. This chapter delves into the circumstances surrounding Mr. Noye's release, his life post-prison, and the impacts of his criminal legacy on his family and society at large. Mr. Noye's eventual release was predictated on a series of parole hearings, where the board considered various factors, including his behaviour in prison, the risk he posed to the public, and evidence of rehabilitation. The decision to grant parole to someone with Mr. Noye's criminal history was met with mixed reactions, highlighting the delicate balance the justice system must maintain between affording individuals a second chance and ensuring the safety and well-being of the community. Upon his release, Kenneth Noye faced the daunting task of reintegrating into a society that had changed significantly during his time behind bars. Navigating the complexities of modern life, from technology to social norms, posed challenges for Mr. Noye, as it does for many long-term inmates. Efforts to lead a quiet life have been complicated by his notoriety, with public and media interest in his activities remaining high. Mr. Noye's post-release life has been characterised by attempts to reconnect with family and establish a new identity beyond that of a convicted criminal. The extent to which he has succeeded in these endeavours remains a subject of speculation, as Mr. Noye has understandably sought to maintain a low profile. The repercussions of Kenneth Noye's criminal actions and subsequent imprisonments have extended far beyond his own life, profoundly affecting his family. The stigma of his crimes, the media attention, and the challenges of maintaining relationships across the divide of the prison walls have taken their toll. Despite these challenges, Mr. Noye's family has played a crucial role in his reintegration, offering support and connection to a world that has moved on in his absence. Mr. Noye's release raises important questions about the concepts of rehabilitation and redemption. Can individuals who have committed serious crimes truly change? What measures can society take to support their reintegration whilst safeguarding public scrutiny? Mr. Noye's case is a testament to the complex journey of redemption, underscoring the need for comprehensive support systems for ex-reoffenders and ongoing assessment of their risk to the community. The story of Mr. Noye's release and the years that have followed is still being written. It is a narrative that encompasses the challenges of starting anew after decades of incarceration, the social responsibilities in facilitating this transition, and the enduring impacts of a criminal past on both the individual and their family. As society continues to grapple with these issues, the case of Kenneth Noye serves as a poignant reminder of the lasting consequences of crime and the adorer's path towards redemption and reintegration. As we reflect on Mr. Noye's life beyond the bars, it becomes clear that his story is not just about the individual, but about the broader themes of justice, forgiveness, and the possibility of change. The legacy of Kenneth Noye remains a complex interplay of past deeds and the future possibilities, serving as a catalyst for ongoing debate on the nature of punishment, the capacity for rehabilitation, and the social role in supporting those who seek to reclaim their place in the world after paying their debt to society. Kenneth Noye's release from prison was not the end of his story, but the beginning of another chapter, one that intertwines with environmental projects, family involvements, and unresolved questions about his activities post-release. Despite stepping away from the criminal limelight, Mr. Noye's name remains enshrouded in controversy, particularly regarding an environmental scheme with implications reaching far beyond the UK. In the quiet town of Sevenoaks, Kent, an unassuming block has become the centre of attention due to its connection with Kenneth Noye. Now in his late 70s, this building serves as the head office for Amazon Forest People, a company claiming to protect the Brazilian jungle from deforestation. Under scrutiny, the project and its affiliations with Mr. Noye have raised eyebrows, especially considering his and his family's involvement in a venture that reportedly amassed around £40 million, a figure disputed by sources close to Mr. Noye's family. Mr. Noye's eldest son, Kevin Tremaine, has been implicated as a significant figure in the establishment of Amazon forest people, despite distancing the project from his father post-inquiries. The initiative, which sells carbon credits to offset pollution, boasts clients like Liverpool FC, Boeing and Samsung, highlighting its reach and influence. However, the project's legitimacy and transparency have come under fire, with accusations of land grabbing and a lack of clarity over financial dealings and the true beneficiaries of the venture. The scheme's operational structure, involving offshore companies and disputed environmental contributions, has prompted concerns over its potential to conceal deeper, possibly illicit motivations. These controversies not only cast a shadow over the Noye family, but also ignite debates over the ethics of carbon credit trading and environmental conservation efforts. The unfolding story around Amazon forest people and its connections to Kenneth Noye brings to the forefront issues of accountability, environmental stewardship, and the challenges of reintegration for individuals with a notorious past. The legal entanglements and the ethical debates surrounding the project underscore the complexities of balancing entrepreneurial endeavours with the need for transparency and genuine contribution to environmental causes. Kenneth Noye's involvement in post-release activities, whether directly or through family associations, reflect the persistent challenges he faces in shredding the legacy of his criminal past. The controversies surrounding the environmental scheme highlight the ongoing struggle between seeking redemption and the public's skepticism about the sincerity and legality of such endeavours. As Mr. Noye navigates life beyond prison, the intertwining of his family's actions with environmental and ethical issues serves as a reminder of the lasting impact of one's past on future aspirations. The story of the Amazon forest people, set against the backdrop of Mr. Noye's criminal history, raises critical questions about the possibility of genuine change and the responsibility of individuals and companies in contributing to a more sustainable and equitable world. Kenneth Noye's post-release life, marked by attempts to engage in environmental protection efforts through complex and controversial means, underscores the ongoing influence of his past actions and present endeavours. As society grapples with the challenges of environmental conservation, the saga of Mr. Noye and Amazon forest people exemplifies the intricate dance between redemption, accountability, and the pursuit of noble causes amidst the shadow of a notorious legacy. Kenneth Noye's criminal past and subsequent legal saga have left a lasting legacy on the British public, the criminal underworld, and the criminal justice system. This chapter examines the multifaceted legacy of Mr. Noye, considering how his life of crime and the dramatic events that followed have influenced legal practices, public perceptions of crime and punishment, and the ongoing discussion about rehabilitation and redemption. Mr. Noye's criminal activities, particularly his involvement in the Brinksmat robbery and his subsequent flight from justice, have had a significant impact on legal and law enforcement practices in the UK. His ability to evade capture for an extended period highlighted the need for improved international cooperation in the pursuit of fugitives. Additionally, the complexities of prosecuting high-profile cases like Mr. Noye have led to discussions about the need for reform in the criminal justice system to ensure swift and fair trials. The story of Kenneth Noye has captivated the British public, in part due to the extensive media coverage it received. His transition from a seemingly successful businessman to a convicted murderer has sparked debates about the nature of crime and the potential for individuals to lead double lives. The media's portrayal of Mr. Noye as a mastermind of the criminal underworld has contributed to a mythology around his persona, raising questions about the glorification of criminals and the impact such narratives have on public perception. Mr. Noye's case has now become a focal point in the broader debate about the possibilities of rehabilitation and redemption for convicted criminals. His life sentence, with the prospect of eventual parole, forces society to confront difficult questions about forgiveness, change, and the practicalities of reintegrating serious offenders back into the community. The discussion surrounding Mr. Noye's potential for rehabilitation also reflects larger concerns about the effectiveness of the prison system in achieving its rehabilitative goals. The legacy of Kenneth Noye is not solely defined by his criminal achievements or the legal battles that he ensued. It is also measured by the lasting impact on the victims of his crimes and their families. The murder of Stephen Cameron and the financial crimes associated with the Brinks-Mat robbery have had profound effects on those directly affected, serving as a somber reminder of the human cost of criminal activity. The ongoing suffering of these individuals and their quest for justice and the closure are critical components of Mr. Noye's legacy. Kenneth Noye's story is a complex tapestry woven from threads of ambition, criminal ingenuity, and the pursuits of justice. His legacy extends beyond the individual acts of crime to encompass the broader themes of law enforcement, media influence, society values, and the capacity for human redemption. As society continues to grapple with these issues, the case of Kenneth Noye remains a permanent study in the extremes of human behavior and the enduring quest for justice in the face of darkness. As this narrative concludes, it is clear that the legacy of Kenneth Noye will continue to provoke thought, debate, and reflection for some years to come. His story encapsulates the ongoing struggle between good and evil, the complexities of human psyche, and the never-ending pursuit of a fair and effective criminal justice system. In the end, the tale of Kenneth Noye is not just about a man, but about the society that shaped him and the legacy he leaves behind, challenging us to reflect on our values, our justice system, and the capacity for forgiveness and change. As the narrative of Kenneth Noye's life comes to a close, we are left to ponder the profound questions his story raises about crime, punishment, and the possibility of redemption. Mr. Noye's journey from the outskirts of legality to the centre of one of the UK's most notorious criminal sagas offers a stark reflection on the nature of justice and the capacity for change within the human soul. This epilogue seeks to draw lessons from Mr. Noye's life and the impact of his actions, looking towards a future where such stories might serve as warnings and guideposts for society. Kenneth Noye's story focuses us to confront the questions of whether individuals who commit heinous acts can truly change. The debate over Mr. Noye's potential for rehabilitation and redemption reflects broader societal uncertainties about the nature of justice and forgiveness. As Mr. Noye serves his sentence, the possibility for his reformation and reintegration into society remains a continuous issue, emblematic of the challenges faced by a penal system in balancing the need for punishment with the hope for redemption. The legacy of Kenneth Noye and the events surrounding his life offer critical lessons for society. His rise within the criminal underworld underscores the importance of vigilance and integrity in law enforcement and the legal system. The fascination with his story highlights the media's role in shaping public's perceptions of crime and justice, reminding us of the power of narrative in influencing society's values. Moreover, Mr. Noye's case serves as a cautionary tale about the allure of quick success and the moral compromises that often accompany unchecked ambition. Looking beyond the shadows cast by Kenneth Noye's crime, there is an opportunity for society to reflect on and address the root causes of criminal behaviour. This includes tackling social-economic disparities, enhancing community support systems, and improving educational opportunities to deter individuals from turning to crime. Furthermore, Mr. Noye's story emphasises the need for ongoing reforms in the criminal justice system to ensure fair trials, humane treatment of inmates, and effective rehabilitation programs. Ultimately, the goal is to create a safer, more just society where stories like Kenneth Noye's are the exception rather than the norm. This requires a collective effort to uphold the rule of law, foster social cohesion, and promote values of empathy and redemption. By learning from the past and working towards these ideals, society can hope to prevent future tragedies and support the transformation of those who have strayed into the darkness. The story of Kenneth Noye is a reminder of the complexities of human nature and the challenges of administering justice in a modern society. As we move forward, it is imperative that we carry with us the lessons learned from his life and the lives he affected. In doing so, we honour the victims of his crimes and contribute to the ongoing endeavour to build a more equitable and compassionate world. Beyond the shadows of Mr. Noye's legacy lies the potential for growth, understanding and reaffirmation in our shared humanity. As this narrative concludes, we are reminded that the journey towards understanding and justice is ongoing, with each chapter of history providing new insights and challenges. Kenneth Noye's story, with all its darkness and complexity, is a part of a larger narrative, offering lessons that, if heeded, can help light the way to a brighter, more just future.
Hello, Ken, please. Please, can I help you?
Hello, yeah, I've just seen somebody stabbed.
Where?
This is the actual recording of someone who has just witnessed the stabbing of a young man. Within an hour of this call, the victim was pronounced dead, prompting a worldwide manhunt.
There was two guys having a fight, and I saw a guy in a Range Rover pull a knife out of his right-hand pocket and stab the guy in a red van in the chest.
This is the story of that manhunt. It's a story not only of murder, but of stolen gold and the notorious killing of a policeman. A manhunt that would lead the police to come face to face with a past they had wanted to forget. The Swanley roundabout in Kent, where the M25 and M20 meet, is one of Europe's busiest roundabouts. Monitored here at Kent Police's traffic centre, thousands of cars pass through it every day. On Sunday the 19th of May, 1996, the roundabout was the scene of a crime that sent shockwaves through the country. John Saunders is a lorry driver. On that Sunday, he was finishing his milk farm rounds in Kent. He was driving along the A20 towards the Swanley roundabout.
Come around there every day, 7 days a week, every week for about 2 years, so I knew the road pretty much like the back of my hand, even down to the sequencing of the traffic lights on the junction.
At the same time, 17-year-old Danielle and 21-year-old Stephen were heading for the same roundabout. It was Stephen's idea to buy bagels in London. Danielle had only recently passed her driving test. Approaching the Swanley roundabout, she was attempting her first motorway outing in Stephen's Red Rascal van.
I came down to the junction, first set was on green. Oh yeah, this is good. I knew that if the first set I came to was on green, I could pretty much rely on getting around the whole lot without stopping.
At the very point John Saunders was approaching the traffic lights, according to Danielle, she was forced to brake sharply as a Land Rover Discovery cut in front of them.
The driver of the Discovery gets out, as did the passenger of the van. I'm thinking, oh, what's going on here? They walk round, meet each other between the two vehicles, and they seem to be having some sort of discussion. As they get a little nearer, it breaks into a fight. So I thought, well, if I use the size of my vehicle, kind of try and scare them into reality, hoot at them, you know, they might come to their senses. And it had absolutely no effect. pulled up just clear of the junction, dialed 999 on the mobile phone. All the time I was watching them in the mirror. I could see they were still fighting, punching, kicking. As I'm speaking to the police on the phone, I see the older of the two gentlemen punch the younger man and to punch him in the chest. This bloke, the younger man, sort of slumped to the floor. I thought, oh, that was a hard blow, he's winded him. The older man then strode purposefully back to his vehicle, got in and drove off.
John Saunders got out of his lorry to see if there was anything he could do, and found that others too had stopped to offer help. Danielle was hysterical.
She was screaming, "Steve, don't go, don't leave me, Steve." Which was about the only coherent thing I could make. She was absolutely hysterical. His complexion was sort of almost deathly white. His eyes were rolled. He wasn't moving, wasn't saying anything. He was just very ill.
But Stephen was not ill. He was dying. The punch to the chest was made with a knife, not a fist. Stephen had been fatally stabbed through the heart and through the liver. Another witness who had seen the fight tried to follow the Land Rover Discovery as it took off up the slip road to the M25. He called 999 from his car phone.
I saw a guy in a Range Rover pull a knife out of his right-hand pocket and stab the guy in a red van in the chest.
Have you got the index of the Range Rover?
It was L964 something. I didn't catch the line.
Right, what colour was it?
It was a sort of bluey green. I'm not 100% sure yet because it was just such a shock.
Right.
He was weaving in and out of the traffic.
And the person in the red van, do they require an ambulance, do you know?
Well,
Once this witness lost sight of the Land Rover Discovery, the car disappeared into the Sunday afternoon traffic, never to be seen again. The story electrified Britain.
Just yards from the M25 motorway, a murder hunt is underway after what appears to have been an horrific attack of so-called road rage. The driver of this red Bedford van was the victim, stabbed in the chest by another motorist who stopped his Land Rover Discovery alongside on this motorway slip road. Police are searching the area for clues to the attacker. They'll also study videotapes from dozens of surveillance cameras along the motorway.
The tearful 17-year-old Danielle moved the nation with her appeals for the killer of her fiancé. Her face is hidden as she is under witness protection.
And Steve came round and said, he stabbed me down, get his number plate. And I called the number plate out to him and I just went and held him. He just looked at me as if to say, please help me, and there was nothing I could do.
This is the victim's vehicle. There's a considerable amount of blood staining on the road around the vehicle.
The crime scene confronting the police was recorded on this police video, where there was no forensic evidence. The blood soaking the road was Stephen's, not the killer's. There was no weapon, no DNA, nothing to identify the killer. But the crime had been committed in broad daylight. There were hundreds of people in their cars passing through Swanley roundabout. 29 had given witness statements, and the police were able to build up an e-fit of the killer. No one doubted the case would soon be solved. The job of solving this crime would fall to Detective Superintendent Nick Biddis.
It's probably one of those that you would have thought, on the face of it, 1:20 on a Sunday, busiest roundabout in the world, the M25. Quite a few witnesses that perhaps it would have been fairly straightforward to have traced the driver of the vehicle.
But it was turning out to be far from straightforward. The camera on the Swanley intersection was not set up to record, and on the day of the murder, was not even working. And despite the hundreds of calls, there was no good lead on the real identity of the killer from the E-Fit. And of the many witnesses, no one had taken the full number plate of the Land Rover Discovery. Initial police optimism of a quick arrest vanished, as surely as the killer himself.
I think it was a case of everybody, somebody, nobody. Everybody thought somebody may have got the registration number of the vehicle, but nobody did.
The police didn't even know the colour of the car.
Different witnesses describing it as a maroon one, a green one, a blue, a black one. But of course the way the sunlight probably hits these metallic vehicles, they do look different. The only thing we could be sure of, reasonably sure of, it was an L-registered Land Rover Discovery.
From the start, the police were under pressure from both the press and the public to get results. Ian Edmondson and Gary Jones were journalists at the News of the World.
The police were, I think, very frustrated because they thought that they would have the name of the killer and would be able to catch that person very, very quickly. That someone would get the number plate, that they'd recognise the car, and all this information would flood in.
The task facing the police was daunting. There were 17,000 L-Reg Land Rover Discoveries in the National Police computer, any one of which could have been the killer's. But which one? It was like looking for a needle in a haystack. But what seemed an overwhelming task brought an early breakthrough. One of the first local addresses they came across was that of an Anthony Francis of Bridgen Road, and yet Anthony Francis was nowhere to be found.
After checking dozens of vehicles and taking thousands of statements, detectives have appealed for help in tracing one particular vehicle and its owner.
A Land Rover Discovery, dark blue, grey. The registration, which is L794 JTF.
The vehicle has been traced to this address in Bexley, 10 miles from the murder scene. Its registered owner, an Anthony Francis, described as in his 20s or early 30s and stockily built, vanished several weeks ago.
There was one person who would never forget the name Anthony Francis, ex-flying squad officer Anthony Brightwell.
The Kent police made it known that they were looking for a man called Tony Francis in connection with the Land Rover that was at the scene of the murder of Cameron. I was absolutely totally shocked that this name was mentioned, amazed in fact, because I immediately recognised this as an alias of Kenneth Noye.
Was the Anthony Francis the police were looking for really just another name for a face from the past? Kenny Noye, a man whose wealth and criminal history had occupied the headlines of the 1980s. The possibility seemed beyond belief. Kenny Noye was the stuff of legend. His parents had moved from the gritty Dockland areas of southeast London to more suburban Bexley, and it was here that Kenneth Noye grew up. He spent a year's stretch at Borstal for receiving stolen cars, but sharp business deals in property and gold soon changed his fortunes, and he built Hollywood Cottage in Kent. Hollywood Cottage was not a cottage, but a mansion in 11 acres of land.
Extreme wealth, extreme visible wealth. He moved in the same social circles as certain members of the Kent police. He dined with certain members of the Kent police.
But it was his connections to Britain's top criminals that made his name in the 1980s, when he was put on trial for killing a policeman and handling the gold from the biggest bullion theft ever seen in Britain. But was Noye really the same person as the Anthony Francis the police were looking for? Old mortgage documents in the name of Anthony Francis, obtained by Kent police, soon confirmed Francis was indeed an alias for Noye. There were clear prints on the documents that matched the prints stored in the National Police records. Another piece to the jigsaw fell into place when the police found out that Kenneth Noye had gone missing.
Vehicles disappeared, he's disappeared. Didn't take too much to work out that he was very high then on our priority list for interview.
There was one other piece of evidence that fell into place. By tracing the positions of the calls made on Kenneth Noye's mobile phone on the day of the murder, the police were able to plot his journey. Noye had been at the right place at the right time. From the moment Noye's name entered the frame, the challenge for the police was to keep it out of the press.
Well, I got a call from an old contact of mine who I'd speak to him about crime stories and had done for years. And he called me one afternoon, it was late in the week, and he sounded very nervous. And he told me he didn't want to speak on the telephone. And we arranged to meet that night in a pub near Greenwich. And over a few drinks, he said, "You'll never guess who killed Stephen Cameron." And I said, "Well, yeah." And he said, "Kenny Noye." And I just remember my jaw hitting the ground, thinking it's incredible that someone like Kenny Noye could get caught up in all that.
The guy from the News of the World's ringing me up, asking me to confirm whether or not we were seeking to interview Kenny Noye in relation to the M25. I told him quite clearly it was not my policy to discuss any individual that we may seek in relation to this or any other murder inquiry at the stage we were at.
He was shocked and surprised that we had this information, and you could almost hear his brain whirring with the sound that, oh my God, this throws our investigation completely out of sync. What are we going to do now? And his first reaction to me was, "Well, you can't possibly print it, can you?" My first reaction was, "Well, we can possibly print it because we are going to do so."
Within 36 hours, there it was, on a national Sunday newspaper, the fact that Kent police were looking for Kenny Noye, together with a photograph of Kenny Noye. Not very helpful. I was livid. Absolutely livid.
The police investigation would never be the same again, for Kenny Noye had a past to conjure with, a past to mesmerize both press and public. And it starts with the biggest bullion heist of the century.
The bullion thieves forced their way into the top security depot beneath the Heathrow flight path just after 6 o'clock this morning. There were at least 6 of them, 3 armed with revolvers and automatic pistols.
It was 1983. The robbers had escaped with 3 tons of gold worth £26 million. Ronnie Knight, who was himself later questioned about the raid, was a club owner in Soho at the time. The robbery was the talk of the town.
People used to come in the club, and that's all they used to talk about. What about that? Listen to that. Oh, I might have a bit of that, and things like that. You had it from everyone, you know. So it was one of the biggest things out. You know, everyone talks about it.
First on the scene at the Heathrow trading estate was Flying Squad Officer Tony Brightwell.
Chairs were thrown all over the place. Handcuffs were found. Ropes were found. There was a smell of petrol in the air. One could tell immediately that there'd been an armed robbery, and a violent armed robbery at that.
He's made himself
The Brinks-Mud security guards had just started their work shift. They had consignments in the vaults of currency, diamonds and precious metals waiting to be shipped all over the world.
Get on the floor! Now!
The guards were hit at speed, they were disorientated, shocked. Here were 3 armed men with masked faces, automatic weapons, shouting, continually shouting.
Get down! Don't you move! Head off!
One guard was hit on the back of the head with a gun. Cloth bags were pulled over the guards' heads and petrol was poured over them. And then the armed robbers forced 2 of the guards to the vaults. In the vaults, the robbers forced the guards through the security gates and eventually through to the safes themselves. But then they hit a problem. One of the guards had forgotten the combination number.
He was shaking so much when he was asked to open the safes. He had a total mental block and couldn't recall the combination number that he had locked away somewhere.
Unable to get into the safes, It was almost an afterthought that they noticed the boxes lying on the floor. They had come across 2,670 kilos of gold, worth £26,370,000.
When you've opened up the box and you find all gold bars there, well, God, Jesus. You're going to say, how are we going to get rid of it? How are we going to get it out of here?
The gold was in the form of pure gold bars, stamped with special markings. It would be immediately recognizable. The gold had to be melted down, and then it had to be got rid of. And for this, they needed someone who knew the business.
Noye was obviously a wheeler dealer at that time. A guy that was involved in fencing lorry loads, stolen lorry loads, fencing goods, placing goods, organising the disposal of goods. Very well connected, very cunning, but a serious background player.
Police first became suspicious of Kenneth Noye after he arrived in Jersey with £50,000 in £50 notes. He walked into a bank without an appointment and asked to buy £100,000 worth of gold. Noye was soon put under surveillance, and aerial photos were taken of Kenneth Noye's house. The grounds had old underground war bunkers and large stores. Could they hold the Brinksmat gold? Watching movements outside Hollywood Cottage, detectives began to suspect that the visits of a man called Brian Reeder involved a handover of the gold. A fateful decision was then taken that would tear the investigation apart. Neil Murphy was one of 2 officers picked to go undercover into the grounds of Hollywood Cottage at night to find out if a handover of the gold was taking place.
We were ready for a very boring evening shift. And within minutes of us being there, in fact the other 2 lads hadn't even gone home yet, within minutes of being there, Brian Reeder turned up. So it was action time.
Neil Murphy and his colleague John Fordham were trained in SAS rural surveillance techniques.
We got into the position that we were aiming for, which was a position quite close to like the corner of the house, so we could see 2 sides of the house, we could see the cars. The sort of place we'd be aiming for to stay the night and watch what happened.
But Neil Murphy and John Fordham never got to stay the night, for barely had they got into position that things started to go wrong.
We'd gone into the property a good 150 yards or so when the dogs came and surprised us. And the dogs were around us, like barking and jumping up at us, not biting us, but making a real noise. I thought personally that we're wasting our time here now, and Noye and Reeder's going to come out to investigate the noise. It seemed obvious to me that would happen. So I gave John a bit of a nod, although of course we're talking about it's very dark. I gave John a nod to tell him that I'm going to leave here, and I assumed that he was coming with me. I climbed up on the wall. Just as I was climbing up, I looked back and could see torch lights and could hear people talking back where I'd last seen John. And that was the first time I was a little bit concerned.
After jumping down outside the grounds, Neil Murphy made his way round to the front of Hollywood Cottage.
When I approached the front of the property, I looked across into the grounds because I'd heard voices, and there was obviously something happening just inside the property on the ground. But then, after a minute or so, we heard, or I heard, someone shout, "I'll blow your head off." And I realised then, what I thought was a stick could well be a shotgun. So I radioed that to the control that I've heard them say, "We'll blow your head off." And of course, the flight squad were in there within minutes.
John Fordham had been stabbed 10 times.
Just horror. Just scared.
I was situated in the control room at Scotland Yard, monitoring events. Everyone was full of great expectancy that night. We really thought we were on the verge of cracking a big case and finding out where the gold was coming from. But then all of a sudden, all hell broke loose, and it quickly became apparent, even in the control room, several tens of miles away, that the evening had turned into a total disaster.
After Kenneth Noye and Brian Reeder were arrested, Neil Murphy got in the ambulance with his friend and colleague, John Fordham.
Well, the journey was horrific. John's chest was moving up and down, his bare chest, and it was moving up and down. And I was pleased. I remember being really chuffed with that, thinking, oh, at least he's breathing. I remember saying to the ombudsman, well, you know, at least he's alive, he's breathing, it's going well. And he said to me, no, he's not. He said, that's the oxygen I'm giving him, it's blowing out his lungs. He's not breathing, he's in a bad way.
Detective Constable John Fordham, father of 3, died that night.
Once I heard it was a police officer, I thought whoever done that is in trouble. Absolutely trouble. Because, you know, you can't do these things. They're there to look after us, not us to kill them. And that's it.
In the police search at Hollywood Cottage, 11 gold bars were found. But the gold had already been smelted and all markings gone. No one could say whether it was Brink's matte gold or not. The police operation had been a failure.
Not only did we lose a loyal and particularly well-liked police officer, but also, following his death, the investigation collapsed. And the chances of us ever recovering the gold bullion, which we so desperately sought to recover, dissipated that night. It was a total disaster.
And it was not only a disaster for the police, but the events of that evening would make Kenneth Noye a marked man for life.
Late this afternoon, Kenneth Noye, his wife...
When Noye was first arrested after the stabbing of Detective Constable Fordham, he was brought to Dartford Police Station. It was here that Anthony Brightwell came face to face with Kenny Noye for the first time.
As soon as I walked in the interview room and saw Noye, he came towards me to shake my hand, which I immediately recognized as the handshake of a Freemason. And I formed the opinion that here was a man that was showing out to me in hope that I was a fellow Mason that would help him.
Yeah, I said it for you.
I could tell from his mannerisms that he was a man that was used to being manipulative, used to getting his own way, who was looking for angles and for help continually. Continually throughout the interview, he was looking at ways where he could help himself in a situation where he was beyond help, basically.
But the act of killing a police officer would leave no room for compromise.
For killing a police officer, the most serious offence that I know as a former police officer, no going back for Mr. Noye, no deal broking, no way out. He's on his own.
John Matthew, Noye's defence counsel, was one of the country's leading barristers at the time. He had his work cut out for him.
Somebody attacks a police officer with a knife and stabs him 11 times to death, and an unarmed police officer. And I think that if you just string those few facts together, the general perception is, well, how can there be any justification for that?
Kenneth Noye's justification was self-defense, and in court he gave his version of what happened that night.
Noye was in his kitchen and went out, got from his car outside a torch, and also grabbed, because it was in the car, because he'd been cleaning the battery terminals with it. There was a kitchen knife in the car as well. He went into the wood quite openly, flashing his torch and calling out, "Who's there?" And in the light of the torch, at night, in the wood, Noye is suddenly confronted face to face with a man in a flat jacket and a balaclava helmet.
Oi!
Noye, of course, said, the whole thing was so frightening, I thought I was being killed. I didn't think I had a chance of living. I was fighting for my life. I was in a total panic, and I was just, this man was on top of me, and I was stabbing away with this knife in a frenzy.
John Matthew persuaded the judge to allow the jury to experience Hollywood Cottage at night for themselves.
This evening, under heavy guard, Noye himself came here to view the house and grounds, along with the judge and jury.
We went down, and it was a dark, blustery night with a little bit of moon, and we went into that wood, and I tell you, it was really quite scary even then. And I think that probably created a good deal of effect upon the jury.
It took the jury of 7 men and 5 women 12.5 hours to reach their verdict of not guilty. When the verdict was announced, Noye and Reader shouted to the jury, "God bless you all." Kenneth Noye added, "That's what I am, not guilty."
The man in the street was absolutely amazed and felt it was a travesty, but of course the man in the street hadn't had any of the evidence.
The jury were in a difficult position, and they chose to believe that, you know, police officer acted lawfully in the grounds of a property, receives 10 stab wounds, and that's okay. That's lawful. The jury let him off with it.
Well, I would have said it was self-defence, because what was the man doing in his garden? I mean, was he a burglar? He didn't know it was a policeman.
People were saying to me, what an amazing result. And I would say, well, you know, it wasn't really. It was always on the cards. And I think it was the right result.
Kenneth Noye's not guilty verdict would only enhance his reputation for Houdini-like powers in the eyes of the tabloid press. But his luck was about to run out. In a separate trial, he was found guilty of handling the Brinksmat gold. Kenneth Noye was sent down for 14 years. But even this long sentence was not enough for some who would never forget the conviction they thought had got away.
Police officers have a phrase that they will come again. And what we mean by that is, if someone gets away with it at court where police officers feel they were guilty or know they were guilty and they walk away with it, we expect that they will reoffend and be convicted next time. So justice, in the end, usually works out.
Whatever happened to Kenny then after that, I don't think anything, I don't think they got in anything. No matter what, if he got caught nicking a bit of fish out of a shop, they'd have made it bad for him.
Only 2 years after Noye was released from jail, Stephen Cameron was killed. No one could believe that Noye would risk putting himself in police sights once more, and in such dramatic fashion.
The story went into the stratosphere. Kenny Noye, a famous multi-millionaire criminal, involved in one of the most high-profile murders, was an incredible, sensational story, which everybody wanted a piece of the action of. Police had wanted to nail Kenny Noye for anything for years to come, simply because he was a very high-profile criminal. They hated him because he'd killed a colleague. The idea that he could have been wrapped up in something like this at first was extraordinary, and then they became incredibly excited at the prospect of hunting this man down.
The story that the police were looking for Kenny Noye begged an important question. How did the information get out?
I knew there were people within the police organisation that were prepared, whether it was for money or not, I don't know, but were prepared to divulge information about Kenneth Noye, a police killer, and there's still police officers who are prepared to give a national newspaper information that didn't help me when that was published.
Apart from any leaks to the papers, Superintendent Nick Biddis was haunted by Kenny Noye's old reputation.
He has a reputation whereby because of his wealth, that he can influence and corrupt police officers.
From now on, Nick Biddis would run his investigation on a strictly need-to-know basis.
You've got to be extremely careful because of this reputation he's got, of who knows about it, who's involved, whether you tell somebody, whether you tell this person, whether that person's taken in. Need to know, and if you don't need to know, don't tell them.
Once the story was out, sightings of Kenneth Noye were being reported to the police from all over the world.
There have been sightings of Noye in Lanzarote, where it's claimed he's been living in a luxury villa. He's also said to have been to northern Cyprus. And the speculation that Noye plans to have surgery to change his appearance and buy a ranch in Brazil.
All sorts of places. He couldn't possibly be in all of these places, but people, well-meaning or otherwise, and I've got no reason to believe that they were anything other than genuine calls, ringing in and saying, I think I've seen someone who looks like that man you're looking for.
The tabloid press was having a field day.
It got to a point where, you know, Kenneth Noye was being spotted on the moon almost. It was getting ludicrous. I mean, the idea that Kenneth Noye was coming in and out of the country, having a few beers with his mates and then hopping back on a plane back to wherever he was, it was ludicrous.
We had reported sightings or reports that Kenneth Noye's best friend's daughter's going to get married at a certain location. Kenny will not miss that wedding for the world. He'll be there. We had reported sightings or reports that he was at or going to an old friend's funeral. He wouldn't miss that funeral for the world. He'll be there. We actually went to more weddings and funerals than Hugh Grant, and that's with all the repeats as well.
Kenneth Noye was as elusive as ever. Kent police had to check out leads in 10 different countries. But he didn't go to Brazil, or Eastern Europe, or France. He went to Spain, long known for its Costa del crime. But Spain had its dangers for the man on the run.
Because your mug's sent over, your photo's sent right over there, because naturally they think they've gone to Spain. Or they might know you've gone to Spain, so they send the mugshot over you. And everyone's looking for you then. Plus you're in the papers here, and everyone knows you're here. So when the tourists go over there, they bump into you if you use these places where everybody else uses.
The police got a tip-off that Kenneth Noye had fled not to a busy tourist area, but to the more remote southwest coast of Spain. It was one more lead to follow up. John Jesusek was one of the 2 officers who were picked to check it out. He was under strict orders to keep the operation to himself.
Nobody knew apart from the SIO at the time, Mr. Biddis, that we were in actual fact going out there. I mean, we weren't even allowed to tell our families where we were going.
I just couldn't afford to let anyone outside of the small amount of officers, perhaps no more than 5, know what we were doing. Because if it got out and was reported upon, it would have blown the lid off this, and we just could not afford to do it.
Sending 2 officers to a foreign country without going through the official routes, with no backup, to trace a known police killer was a huge gamble.
It did cause me a lot of heartache to think that I'm sending 2 officers out there with absolute minimum backup, and I'm asking them to try and find Kenneth Noye. Don't forget, when John Fordham was killed, he had the backup of a full team, and he was stabbed to death.
Every day we had to report back to Nick Biddis what we're doing, where we're going, who we're seeing, and also he was ringing us at all times during the day, you know, morning, noon and night, just to check in up on us.
The phone goes, I think it was about 7:30 in the morning. Much routine really, and it was one of them ringing me up, and he said, Governor, we've just seen him, it's him. That was a eureka moment, because now, 2 years down the line, I knew where the man was that I believe had killed Stephen Cameron.
So Kent police knew where their man had gone. But how could they bring him back? To get Kenneth Noye arrested in Spain, they had to show they had enough grounds to charge him with murder. For this, they would need an eyewitness who could identify Kenneth Noye as the man who had killed Stephen Cameron.
I saw his knife and I was pleading with him not to hurt Steve, and I couldn't go near him because I felt he would hurt me.
The crucial eyewitness to the killing of Stephen Cameron was his fiancé, Daniel Cable. Superintendent Biddis was about to embark on a new and daring plan to get Danielle to identify Stephen's killer in his bolt hole in Spain. After 2 years pursuing Kenneth Noye, Nick Biddis had him in his sights, and now he wanted to bring him home. For this, he needed the prime witness, Danielle Cable, to go out to Spain to come face to face with the killer of her fiancé. The man who would be responsible for Danielle was Kent's ID officer. He has requested not to be identified in order to protect his family.
I thought, well, this is going to be a nightmare. When you're taking out a member of the public and a critical witness to a serious offence, you really have got to be careful of her welfare as well as your own. If we went out there and our cover got blown, we'd be hung out to dry if anything did go wrong.
Even Danielle wasn't told where she was going. Secrecy, once again, was paramount.
I picked her up on that Friday. She thought she was going to the north of England. And a few hours later, she finds herself in Spain.
Daniel Cable was taken to the area near Barbati. To identify Kenneth Noye in a public place would be fraught with dangers.
There's so many things that can go wrong at any given moment of the day or night, because we'd have to get close enough to the suspect to give the witness an opportunity of seeing whether she could recognise him. And the nearer we got, the more danger it was of being discovered and our cover being blown.
When the time came, it was in a very public place that Danielle had to attempt her identification. Keeping up the surveillance on Kenneth Noye, Kent police officers thought he had gone into a busy fish restaurant with his family and friends. It was now or never.
Immediately you came into the light, you were in full view of all the customers that were sitting at the tables at the front of the restaurant. And there were no vacant tables, so we couldn't even sit down and try and blend in and then give Danielle a chance to look around.
With her blonde hair, Danielle was already attracting attention. There'd be no second chances. If Danielle failed to pick the suspect out, the police officers would be going home.
And then we had to walk to the left into the bar, and we couldn't go any further. Then I asked Danielle to go and stand at the open window and view the whole restaurant from that position. The Spanish officer went to the far side of the window, I remained near side, but I told Danielle not to stay in the window for too long before drawing to one side or the other. And try not to draw attention to the fact that she was looking, just glance as a matter of fact.
It was on her second glance that Danielle recognized the man sitting at the end of the table.
She started to get physically distressed, and I knew that she'd identified Kenneth Noye. I thought someone is going to look up in the moment and say, why were those people hanging around that window? Or did you see that blonde girl? I was very concerned that we ought to get out of there as quick as possible, but not draw attention to the fact that we was fleeing the restaurant. The adrenaline was pumping. at all times, my fear was that Danielle was going to be seen to be distressed, and that would draw attention from one or two tables. We were on our own, and we didn't know whether anybody from that table was getting up to follow us out to that car park, because we daren't look round anymore. We daren't give the game away. We just wanted to get out.
The killer of Stephen Cameron had finally been identified as Kenneth Noye. The very next day, Superintendent Bidders had his arrest warrant, and Kenneth Noye was arrested by the Spanish police and taken to Cadiz police station. There he gave a false passport with a false name, Alan Edward Green.
Tonight, Kenneth Noye is being held in the southern Spanish city of Cadiz after being arrested in connection with Stephen Cameron's murder.
Nick Bidders had been waiting for this moment since May 1996.
Kent Police have been in liaison with the Crown Prosecution Service during the past few weeks, and with the assistance of Interpol, this arrest has been effected.
I mean, you know, Superintendent Bidders basically turned over the press. I mean, you know, he got his revenge, as it were, by pulling off, you know, what was a coup to actually sort of finally get his man, despite what he would say, you know, the press getting in his way, despite, you know, his the police informants giving wrong information, to have had all this mess, all this publicity, to have been pilloried in the press, to finally to have nailed his man on his own terms, and to get Kenny Noye. I mean, yeah, let's not forget that Kenny Noye was his ultimate prey.
Noye was eventually taken back to England under armed guard to Dartford police station. Notoriously camera shy, he was caught here on this Kent police camera.
Kenneth Noye arrived at the Old Bailey with a police escort this morning.
1 year later, under heavy armed guard, Kenneth Noye stood trial at the Old Bailey for the murder of Stephen Cameron. In the witness box, Noye denied that he picked the fight in anger at Danielle's driving. Instead, he said he was the victim, not the perpetrator of rage. He said he thought Stephen Cameron was someone he knew and got out of his car only to be confronted by a man in a fury. He said he got out his knife to fend off Cameron, but exhausted by a fight he could not win, and fearing that his own knife would be used against him, in desperation, he ended up stabbing him. His plea, once again, was self-defense.
He had a major problem there, didn't he? Because here was somebody who now twice had killed with a knife, and both times his defense was self-defense. And of course everybody knew about the police murder. And therefore he was up against it.
The jury took a day to return their verdict. 11-1, guilty.
Well, of course he's been unlucky. I mean, he's had two things and he's had two fights and they both died. You can't get no luckier than that.
When I heard the verdict, my basic gut reaction was, yes, thank you, justice has now been served.
Delight, ecstatic. I got a phone call while I was at work, on the phone, I think within seconds of the verdict, and I was absolutely ecstatic.
But the constant press attention in the previous 2 years and the suspicion that Noye had already been tried and convicted in the tabloid press still makes some uneasy.
I think there must be the gravest suspicion as to whether Noye could ever have had a totally fair trial as a result of the publicity.
I don't honestly think that too many people would remember the name of Stephen Cameron, but they will Kenneth Noye. Stephen came from a family, pretty unremarkable family really, ordinary life, with his life in front of him, and this criminal, already set on a path of criminality, just comes along, wipes him out and leaves him for dead in the gutter. That boy deserves better than that, and I'd like people to remember the name Stephen Cameron rather than Kenneth Noye?
100%. I saw the knife go into his chest and I saw the blood. You know, I would...
Cocooned in our own little triple Cat A prison, so I used to do the cooking. Kenny used to do all the cutting up and the washing up as well. All
that, yeah.
So I was a chef, Kenny was the sous chef. So
he used to give me all the orders.
Yeah. Me and Ken spent about 9 years together in prison. So from the main thing to the full Sutton, so Whitemore, full Sutton. And then I got moved to Loudon Grange. The next thing you know, Kenny's turning up at Loudon Grange. And that's where we decided to do the portrait. So it was a portrait, Kenny sat for it at the time, and we changed a few things on it to make it like a composite picture. We did the flooring, which is thingy, but it's about the Brinks map, you know, in the background was the gold. He used to do a bit of smelting because he used to do a bit of gold, dealing, well, a bit of gold.
Brazil.
A lot of gold. So
he's done a good job. Yeah, I mean, he's learned a lot since when we first met, got into art, and he's not stopped since. Still doing it, and now I've come here, and the pictures are amazing.
What does it mean to you?
Well, it means a lot to me because we've been together all those years, and Steve's come out to nothing, and he's making a go of it, and let's hope it succeeds by selling quite a few paintings. I mean, I've seen some of the pictures when he first started painting. I think it was about 2010. Was it
2002?
Yeah, and he's made a remarkable, he's done very, very well, he has now.
Kenny's followed me all the way through with the degree course and everything.
Yeah.
Helped me out all the way through with sentence, you know. Like we trained together as well in the gym.
Yeah, we used to train every day.
All the time, so...
Yeah, and so as you know, practice makes perfect, and that's exactly what he's done here. He's done these pictures and made a remarkable job.
So you guys seem to have like a book for life, really. Would you say that this picture is particularly special because of that?
Yeah, it is. It's special because it's Steve's picture, and it's about me, and let's hope he does well from it. You know.